Hi everybody, welcome to chapter 16, which is culture and leadership. This is our last chapter that we look at the textbook. I want you to see what I've been saying about this textbook from the entire point of the course. This is the most segmented class that I've ever taught in my life. There was stuff in this class that means absolutely nothing to you, and I understand that and I get that, and it's never going to mean anything to you. But there's stuff in this class that I think is going to help you when you complete your internships, could help you if you do a dissertation. You really need to be able to step away and say, this helped me, this didn't help me, I believe this model, I don't believe this model, and you need to make that distinction and you need to make that separation. And that's going to help you build for what you do in the future. And that's kind of the point of this course, and this is the last thing that we look at. So, culture and leadership in schools, living in Oklahoma, you really see that this is kind of here or not there. I know that every school has culture, blah, 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 but truthfully, when we look at the state as a whole, we see very pocketed migration, and if you don't believe me, Union Public Schools really is showing what this looks like. The migration patterns are pocketed, culture changes, culture develops by the people that are part of the culture. That's a big idea, and that's important. So, why do we have an increase in different culture in schools today? We really do, because we've had a lot of global changes post-World War II. We had a lot of people that moved into the United States, and it caused our organizations and our organizational structure to be very multinational, and leaders have to be aware of the different cultures. And that's a big idea, and that's a big takeaway message. Really, when we talk about immigration and migration, it revolves around work. And when we're in an election year, you see that this comes up and it's a big topic of discussion. But when work is available, people migrate. If you're in a high growth area, there's going to be people that are going to come in from different countries, different cultures, and they're really going to be the ones that migrate from location to location. So one of the things that I want to talk about, because this is something that's impacted our schools in Pennsylvania before I came here, we had Marcellus Shale, and this has been a distribution channel that we've used, and it really impacted the funding of schools. And once again, you know, I'm more finance driven than any of the other courses that I teach here, so I'm always trying to look at where the money goes. What does the money mean in schools? But we had schools that were very poor schools that were in this Marcellus Shale line, and when this happened, there was a huge migration of Hispanic workers, and because of that, there became a huge population of Hispanic students. So Pennsylvania, to compensate, started paying teachers and principals more money if they spoke Spanish. Most schools were not prepared for the change, but if you were bilingual, you got promoted very quickly and you made a ton of money. We had a lot of administrators that were on provisional certificates because, honestly, just because they could speak Spanish. It had nothing to do with their skill set. They could speak Spanish, they got promoted because we had a high bilingual population. And a lot of the schools that were considered poor schools are now top performers. My wife went to a school district, they're called Mohawk in Pennsylvania, one of the lowest performing school districts, bottom of the barrel, low funding, you know, 501 school districts in Pennsylvania, they were in the bottom 100. When Marcellus Shale came in, Mohawk had a huge pocketed patch. They're top 100 school district now. Their teachers are making more money, the taxes have gone down, the property values have increased. But this changed rapidly, basically overnight. And it happens in districts. And you have to be aware of that. I realize this is not a finance course, but everything that I relate to deals with money. And I follow the money. If the money moves from one place to another, that's where school improvement is going to happen. That's where capacity can be invested in improvement, and that changes the culture of the school and the culture of the school system. It all comes down to money, and it always does. So you have a moral, legal, and ethical responsibility to educate all students, no matter what. And you can't lose sight of that. If a child doesn't speak English, the ELL teachers have to be the ones that assimilate them to what English is and give them the opportunity to interact with families, be a part of it. That's their responsibility, and that is an ethical and moral obligation that we have in this country. there's so many studies on globalization and internationalization and cross-cultural competencies. There are 5 different competencies that leaders must have to be relevant in cross-cultural environments. I will delve into these in depth, but I'll discuss them on the next slide kind of as an overview so you have sort of an understanding of these. You have to understand what's going on worldwide for business, political, and cultural environments. What are the trends that are going on in Europe really impact what goes on in the United States and vice versa. You have to understand different perspectives and different cultural interactions with people. That is a big idea, and that's important as well. You have to work simultaneously with people from many cultures. We're all learning how to do this. When I taught high school, we had 1 African American teacher in our building, and I think 2 in the district, and I was in a district with probably 200, 300 teachers, which in Pennsylvania, that's a big school district. We did not have cultural infusion, but now if I were to go back there, it would be huge cultural infusion. You have to be able to adapt to living and communicating in other cultures as well. Where you live might change, and there might be a different sort of just retrenchment of culture that goes down while other ones are coming up. The other idea is this notion of equality rather than superiority. That relates to how cultures interact with each other as well. So, what is culture? Culture is learned beliefs, values, roles, norms, symbols that are common to certain people. It's things that make their group unique. It's a way of life. When you're looking at culture, we have multicultural approaches and diversity. Diversity really is saying that there are different cultures that exist. Multicultural says we're looking at different systems. So it's all systems-based, so it's all, in my opinion, related to organizational theory, which then, once again, it's all related to finance. You can really see where my passion is. That's kind of what I'm thinking about when I look at this stuff. So when I'm looking at this, I look at culture from an organizational standpoint more than I do from a leadership standpoint. But it impacts organizations, and that impacts leadership. Ethnocentrism really is saying that our group is at the center of the group, and almost all of us do that. We look at things from our perspective. I see things as an Italian American male. I'm first generation in this country. I'm 100% Italian. My father was born over there, and it's one of those things where there's still elements of that culture that I can at least see, and I know that I present that in how I interact with people and how I act. In comparative and international education is when we take a system, we look at it, we compare it from one to the other, and I think that's important. Judgment occurs. Some can and some will occur at some points. So the House Globe Research Project was the largest study on culture and leadership that ever existed. It used quantitative methods to study 17,000 managers. It was huge, and there were 9 cultural dimensions that were classified in this study. This is probably the biggest idea of this chapter and the largest idea, so we're going to talk about each one of these. So the first one that came up is uncertainty avoidance. You look at the established social norms and you don't try and understand what the other culture is. Curriculum is designed around the dominant culture. That's a utilitarianistic principle. It does occur and it does happen. And I spoke about that kind of in the beginning of the class, but this is just something that we do. Is it right? Is it wrong? Well, that depends on your ethical threshold. Power distance. There are some members of a group that really expect and agree that power should be shared unequally. From a cultural standpoint, what normally happens is that if you're not part of the dominant culture, you sit back, you don't say anything, and you let the people from the dominant culture be the one that speaks. Institutional collectivism. This is when organizations and in societies encourage institutional or societal collective action. We have an occupation where individuals collaborate together to establish societal collective action. It's normally done with the majority, and it can inhibit those not from the dominant culture. And I think that can be a problem because you have the people that are making the views and they're saying we're doing this as an organization as a whole, and then they have this institutional capacity, and somebody who may not fit with that isn't going to speak up. You might be losing somebody who could really enhance your organizational capacity. Some people have pride and they express their national pride. And that's important. That's a big idea. It's important that you're expressing part of the dominant culture and others have that experience to look at kind of what pride is, and that's sort of this collectivism notion as well. Gender equality, gender equity does not occur on the elementary level, and it's never going to, because the staff is predominantly female. But one of the things that I always see is that if an international student is just moving into this country, maybe they moved in with their mother and 5 of their siblings, and they don't have a male role model, they're probably not going to find a gender-specific male role model in the elementary school. It just isn't, because we have, well, what's the latest statistic? 87% of our staff in elementary schools in the United States is female. So I'm not making a statement that's anti-gender, it's the truth. How are you going to find a male role model in a system where 87% of the people in it are female? So that's a challenge with it. So does that exist? Yeah, that 100% exists. Assertiveness. Different cultures are assertive. Different cultures get what they want. The dominant culture tends to be confrontational and assertive, which creates difficulties for those who don't belong to it. So I think that's another pattern that we're seeing. Some people are smart about what their future looks like and how the future orientation is, delaying gratification. It's really not addressed in schools for professional development, so those that don't belong to the dominant culture might not have an outlet in order to understand ideas and characteristics, and then that creates kind of a disconnect as well. Performance orientation really is how you reward group members for improved performance and excellence. There are different preferred methods of being rewarded that people want. Some people in different cultures would rather have intrinsic motivators. They want to feel a sense of accomplishment and pride. Some just want paid and want more money. There's a balance, and that's an important balance as well. Finally, the humane orientation. This is different cultures that are supposed to be all caring, generous, altruistic, and helpful to others. I argue that if you're in teaching, you need to be all of these. And if you're from a different culture that doesn't respect that, you need to change that orientation, because you have to do this in education. People like rewards in this profession. This is a humanistic profession. Teachers want rewards, students want rewards, administrators want rewards, and cultures have to be kind of tied into that as well. So Nordhaus gives you some characteristics of clusters, what people want. Anglos are really competitive and result-oriented. Your Asian really want group working together, but they're also result-driven, but they're result-driven on how the group achieves the goals. Eastern Europe, really, it's important. There's a lot of equality issues with women and leadership with women. The Germanic Europe is really this competition and aggressiveness in result-oriented. We have to get it done. We have to be effective. I tend to lean more towards that. And Latin America is really more focused on families and similar groups. Latin Europe, individual autonomy. Middle East is devoted and loyal to their own people. Women are afforded less status. Nordic Europe, high priority on what long-term success looks like. Women are treated with greater equality. Southern Asia, strong family, deep concern for their communities. In Sub-Saharan Africa, committed and sensitive to others, and they demonstrate strong family loyalty as well. So this chapter really says, you can look at different cultures, different behaviors. This is big in a doc program, but in a master's level program, we really don't go into this. But if you want to look at different cultural dimensions, I would suggest looking over some of the stuff in this chapter. These are universally desirable leadership attributes. These are things that everybody should be doing. I'll give you a minute just to kind of leave that on the board, but these are sort of your main leadership attributes. So undesirable ones, I think these are all pretty common. Doesn't matter what culture it is. loners don't get along with people, people that are dictators or egocentric or don't cooperate. Those are undesirable leadership actions as well. So how do you apply culture to leadership? Some of you never will. You're not going to work in buildings that are high in culture. Some of you are going to have daily challenges, things that you face on a daily basis. Some of you might have different biases and preferences when you're looking at what culture is and what culture is supposed to be like. That's it. I mean, this is the last lecture in the class. I appreciate the effort that everybody gave. I look forward to working with all of you again in the future. Remember, if you're taking this class in the proper sequence, this is supposed to be the first class that you have in education for your master's. But if there's anything else I can do to help, let me know. And I'm here to help as best as I can. So I hope you had a great class, and I appreciate everybody's effort. Thank you.